2 days from now, President Biden will face reporters in a free-form press conference. And as our next guest, James Carville, wrote in the New York Times, he doesn't think the dam, which held today, can hold forever. Quoting now, "Mark my words," Carville said, "Joe Biden is going to be out of the 2024 presidential race, whether he's ready to admit it or not." James Carville joins us along with CNN political commentator Jamal Simmons, who served as deputy assistant to President Biden and communications director to Vice President Harris. James, do you stand still by what you said, or do you think President Biden has survived this crisis?
Well, I mean, Cook moved 6 states away from Democrats. I watch some of these press conferences, and it reminds me of a book they made me read in college called Ship of Fools. A bunch of desperate people sailing into disaster. And, I just think that cowards have never beat criminals in a war yet. And the way that you beat criminals is not to be cowards, is to take it directly home. There's nothing that I see that remotely changes my mind or changes what I think about where we are.
But do you believe what you said, though, is different than what you said in that you said he's going to drop out. What you're saying is you seem now resigned to or upset about that basically they have capitulated.
No, I don't. And I think like Senator Patty Murray, who's been in the Senate for over 30 years, and the fact that she came out and said this speaks volumes as opposed to what people say in front of a camera. So I still think I'll stand by my thing that he won't run. But if he does, we're just making a idiotic choice for the future of our country. And I can't help but believe that. And the proof's in the pudding. They're moving states away from us. We're losing. We're not winning. And when we lose, America loses. It's that simple.
Jamal, James talks about the Cook Political Report moving 6 states toward Trump after the debate. Do you take that as a terrible sign?
It's not great, Anderson. It's really not great. Listen, the Democrats right now are like in a field of kerosene with a bunch of dandelions made of matches, right? In every direction we turn, a fire could break out, whether we keep President Biden or we don't keep President Biden and we go with a new candidate. So I think what we're seeing now is a bunch of Democrats who are deciding they're going to just stay with the horse that's already on the track, and they're going to try to ride that horse and see how far it goes. I'm also hearing from some Democrats that they're a little nervous that we're trading a problem today for what could be a bigger problem tomorrow and a harder problem to solve tomorrow. So just because people are out in public doesn't mean that everybody's already on board. I think people are waiting to see if there are any more shoes that are going to drop in this before they get completely on board with the candidacy.
Well, James, Jamal obviously raises a very good point, which is one you have talked about. If, find he can talk on a teleprompter, his critics will say, but what happens a month from now or 2 months from now if there's a huge, if there's another debate-like performance?
Well, first of all, Jamal's a very astute and sharp commentator. And so you get through one teleprompter performance. What are you going to do on September 10th when there's another debate scheduled? What are you going to do? He couldn't meet with the German chancellor because he had to go to bed when he was at the NATO conference. Anderson, I just think, you're right. Is there a risk in trying to change directions? Of course, there's risk with everything. But with risk comes hope. And right now, we have always been a party of hope. Hope and place called hope and deal a leader in hope. And I have a dream and keep hope alive. And I don't see any hope in the Democratic Party right now. I see a lot of fear and a lot of, if we try something different, we end up in a ditch. Well, we're already in a ditch. We ought to try to get out of it as opposed to trying to drive in it. But I agree with everything that everybody says. I think we got to have a change. I just genuinely do.
And
Jamal, we just heard some of the kind of. Go ahead, Jamal.
Well, no, I think James makes some interesting points. I do think the president has gotten better over the last week. That event he did in North Carolina was a good event. Obviously, he did the conversation with George Stephanopoulos. I still want to make sure the president has actually watched the debate. I feel like that's kind of entry stakes to having the conversation. The president needs to watch the debate so he can actually know.
Well, again, and
where
he told George
everybody is.
Stephanopoulos he wasn't sure if he had watched it or not. I mean, which
Yeah,
obviously
that was
is
not
great.
the best moment. But the president is getting back to talking about Project 2025 and what's happening with the Republicans. Here's what we know. Much like what happened in France this week, there is an anti-MAGA majority that exists in the country. It existed in 2018, 2020, 2022, and now I think in 2024. The president has to mount a consistent campaign where he's showing people what he can do, and then I think that majority, we're betting, is going to show up again in 2024. If we can do that, then I think we can save the country. And I think the president has been on a path to showing people he can do it, but it's going to be a consistent effort. It's not a question, I think, that is going to get answered. This is one of these questions that's going to be with us all the way into November, or as long as the president is the nominee.
Yeah, and James, that idea of, that there's this anti-MAGA, enough anti-Trump people out there who will just vote for the Biden-Harris ticket because they are anti-Trump, despite any concerns that they have. Do you believe that that is large enough? Because, there was, prior to the debate, I seem to recall a lot of discussion about the need for all these independent voters and all these people who may be on the fence or maybe thinking about third-party candidates. If there is not true heartfelt enthusiasm for a candidate, and it's just, I'm fearful of this other candidate, does that lead to a lot of people staying on the couch or just kind of thinking, well, why am I going to get a babysitter this day to go vote?
Again, congratulate Jamal. He's a sharp commentator. There is an anti-MAGA majority in this country. But I saw Senate polls today. I saw polls in Wisconsin where Tammy Baldwin's up 5 and Trump is down 6. I see the same thing in Nevada. I see the same thing in Arizona, Montana, Pennsylvania, Ohio. I think people want to vote Democratic. They want to vote a change. They're asking for a simple thing. Let's give them change. If we give them change and we give them something fresh, we'll get 54%. We'll keep a Senate majority. We'll win the House back. But we're trying to talk people out of doing something that they want. We're trying to talk people that you really don't want change, and they really do. And if we might win anyway, because maybe, if you look at France or you look at Britain, but that's a big risk we take, and people are asking for something simple, something different. Give it to them. They're not asking for anything hard. That's what I think.
Jamal,
but yes, there are a majority of people who don't want to vote MAGA. True.
Jamal, we just heard some of the lukewarm support for Biden from congressional Democrats. I also want to play something that Democratic Congressman Emanuel Cleaver said today.
Well, I've come to the final conclusion that President Biden is not ready to be rolled into an old folks' home, if that's not an insult.
Again, that's not it. I'm not sure. While Democrats, he's publicly supporting Biden, that's not a message that's exactly, again, going to drive people to the polls.
It's not. Here's where James is right too. I kind of learned some of this stuff working for James and Paul Begala back in the day when I was on the Clinton campaign. Hope is important. Barack Obama had the famous line, there's never been anything false about hope. So one of the things I want to hear the president and the vice president talk more about is what we're going to do to help make the country better for everybody on January 21st. It's not just about being against Trump. I think people have the case against Trump. I want them to give people a really crisp 3-point, one big message, 3 points. Here's what we're going to do to make your life better. I think right now we've got 10 or 12 points about what they want to do. That's too many. People aren't going to be able to digest that. And especially now when things have gotten so tense because of what happened with President Biden, I think we've got to get a very crisp, clear message about how the Democrats are going to improve the world if we beat Trump.
James, I just want to ask you one last question, which is, I'm wondering, what do you say to Democrats who I'm hearing from, and I'm sure you are, I don't know if you check your, messages, but I'm sure you are hearing from, who say, how dare you are even talking about this, because you should be talking about how bad Trump is, and you should not be doing something that weakens Biden. Obviously, in my case, I believe it's my job as a journalist to talk about what is true and what's not true and what we are all seeing, and not be taking, it's not my job to be supporting a particular candidate. What do you say, though, to Democrats about what you are saying? I'm sure you hear this.
I completely understand where you're coming from. I thought about this for a long time. I'm very comfortable with where I am. I'm very comfortable with what I'm saying. And I understand that many people who are friends of mine are not very pleased with me and think I should just fall in line. And I tried everything I could to do that, and I just cannot get there. And I'm not very likely to get there. But trust me, Anderson, trust me, Jamal, I've thought about this and agonized over it. And I don't know, prayed over it, but I think that the country wants a change. And I think the Democratic Party from 1932 to 2022 is the greatest political party in Western democracy. And I've always been very proud to be a member of it. But when people demand in change, as they have numerous times in our history, we've given them what they've demanded. We've given them change. Well, let's give it to them again. Let's do it. That's where I am.
James Carville.
I have not taken the decision lightly. Thank you.
James Carville, Jamal Simmons, thank you.